would like to welcome in by chanting Haribo. Haribo.
Haribo. Haribo.
I pass it on to His Grace Anuttam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Vanamali Prabhu. So I think we'll start. We'll chant a little Jaya Radhamadhava. And I don't know, sometimes maybe it works best if everybody mutes, but then you can chant along with me. If we try to do it responsibly, sometimes by the nature of Zoom, it gets a little messy. But I'll chant and feel free just to kind of jump in and chant with me if you'd like to do that. And then we'll go on to our verse night, which is Bhagavad-Gita, okay? Jai Shri Prabhupada, Jai Shri Singoni Tai, Jai Shri Radha, Jai Shri Radha Krishna, Jai Vaishnav Sangha Ki Jai, Gaura Premanandi, Namo Vishnu Varaya Krishna Stepulation, Shrimati Bhaktivedanta, Samaniti Namani Namaste, Sarazati Deva Bhagavani Charane Namaste, Sashanoni Prastita. So, thank you for Vanamali Prabhu and all the devotees of Boston for giving me this opportunity to be with you this evening. Definitely the coronavirus has been a disaster in many ways around the world. And at the same time, like everything, there's always a silver lining and there's always blessings to be found. So some of the great blessings of this difficult time is that we have the opportunity much, much more than ever before for devotees being able to tie in and listen into classes and kirtans and kathas from all around the world. So that really has been a wonderful thing. And for me, this time of year to February in Boston was definitely not going to happen, but by the grace of Zoom. So I'm very, very happy to be with you. And why don't we go ahead and read the verse? Well, may I mention, let's see, I was going to talk a little about my last trip to Harvard. Let me go ahead and read the verse, or last trip to Boston and to Harvard. Let me read the verse and then we'll come back and I'll kind of talk a little bit of the background and then get into discussion. So the verse that I was given, either by a strange twist of fate or perhaps by the diabolical plan of Valamali Prabhu as the humble communications minister of ISKCON, is he gave me a verse about austerity of speech. So I think this was either he thought that I had a few things to share on this, or he knew that I really needed to learn more about it since I have this role that I'm supposed to be fulfilling. So I'm not sure which of those was his plan, but either way, I take it as an opportunity and a blessing to be able to speak on this topic. So thanks for giving me the chance. So 1715, I'll go ahead and read the Sanskrit. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priya hitam chayat svadhyaya vyasaman chaiva vanmayam tapa uchate. Should I just go right into the word meanings? It's kind of hard to have multiple chanters, or what's your system? Do you do it differently?
No, I think it will be difficult to do in call and response manner. You can go ahead, Prabhu, directly.
Okay. I'll read the verse one more time then. Anudvega karam vakyam satyam priya hitam chayat svadhyaya vyasanam chaiva yanmayam tapa uchate. So the word meanings, anudvega karam, not agitating. Vakyam, words. Satyam, truthful. Priya, dear. Cha, also. Eva, certainly. Vakmayam, of the voice. Tapaha, austerity. Uchate, is said to be. So, translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. I'm just going to change my screen here so I see all of you. Oh, that's much better. Okay. Again, austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, and not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. Purport. One should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. That's an uncommon thing in this day and age for people to speak in a way that does not agitate the minds of others. The Prabhupada says we shouldn't do it. Excuse me. One should not speak in such a way as to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he or she can speak the truth for the instructions of their students, but such a teacher should not speak to those who are not their students if he will agitate their minds. This is penance as far as talking is concerned. Besides that, one should not talk nonsense. That's interesting. That's not in the text. I didn't even notice that reading through preparing for it, but that kind of summarizes the whole thing. Don't talk nonsense. The process of speaking in spiritual circles is to say something upheld by the scriptures. One should at once quote from scriptural authority to back up what he is saying. At the same time, such talk should be very pleasurable to the ear. By such discussions, one may derive the highest benefit and elevate human society. There is a limitless stock of Vedic literature, and one should study this. This is called penance of speech. Jai Shri Prabhupada. Om Jnanatamyanasha Anjana Shalakaya Chakshur Minitamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Novistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamyam Dadati Swapadantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Okay, so again, thanks for this opportunity to be with everybody. As Vanamali Prabhu mentioned, it's actually been some time since I was in Boston. I think the last time I was there actually was in 2016 when we had the 50th anniversary celebration of ISKCON. And Vanamali Prabhu and many of you perhaps were involved there in the temple, hosted us and took nice care of a lot of devotees, stayed at the temple, and you helped us with the catering for the meals. I think there was a big group of devotees down helping in the kitchen to make sure that we catered everything very nicely. So I want to thank everybody for that. And if you haven't seen it, there's a nice video about the 50th anniversary conference, academic conference that was held at Harvard University. And one of the things that made it really special was, as most of you probably know, Prabhupada spoke at Harvard University some years ago. So the opening event of that conference was in the very same room. And we had one scholar, Shani Kirmani, who's a Muslim scholar and a good friend of our movement. He was there as a student when Prabhupada spoke. So he stood at the podium in 2016 and talked about how Prabhupada sat over there and described the whole scene. And that made the whole opening night and the whole event actually quite special. But there's a video of that, excerpts of that, that's available online. So you can look that up. It's quite inspiring. So it's nice to be back with my colleagues, my Vaishnava friends in Boston, if only virtually and not physically. Also, I was noticing it's significant that today is Valentine's Day. So I think it's appropriate to mention that hopefully whatever men that are listening to this class don't immediately turn off the computer and run out to the flower shop. If it's that late, please at least wait until the class is done. But if you haven't done something, you're in hot water, because I just reminded your spouse or your significant other that today is that day. So it's a day of flowers and candy and cards, right? All the Hallmark shops are full of Valentine's Day cards, and the flower shops are full of flowers, and candy stores sell all their candy. So Valentine's Day, it's a February 14th, a significant day in the country. I think it's celebrated in a lot of places around the world. I'm sure Hallmark and those folks had a lot to do with marketing it to make it a big deal in countries where it wasn't previously. So today, people try to think about people that they love in their life and all of that. But actually, it's a reminder. It's not just candies and cards and flowers, but actually, it was thinking about it. It's actually, in many ways, it's a reminder to everyone how important love is as a factor in the world. And of course, it's become very, very commercialized, but it is a fact that it's an attempt to try to stop and highlight how important love and affection is. I remember even as a student in elementary school, right, all the kids make Valentine's Day cards for their friends and for their teachers, and some sense of reminding people about appreciation. And as practitioners of bhakti, we would think, oh, this is a nice thing. Everybody's stopping and considering how important love is in the world. But for us, we actually say it's not just important, it's actually the essence. It's the essence of life. It's the essence of the world. It's the essence of existence. And we go so far as to say that it actually is the purpose of life is to love and to be loved. That's the purpose of existence. So many different philosophical schools of thought about the purpose of life and the goals of life and the best use of life. Our proposal is quite simple and very, very profound, which is that life is meant to awaken love and to learn how to love others and to learn how to accept that love and understand that love. And ultimately, in the highest sense, of course, which makes the rest of it all fall together, is to reawaken what already exists, which is our love for Krishna, for the Supreme Lord, and the Supreme being the Supreme Love. And in that way, our Vaishnavacharyas teach us, in that way, we can actually love all beings. Probably gives this nice example. If you water the root of a plant, then all the leaves, all the flowers, the twigs, the branches, everything is taken care of. So that's the philosophy that we present, that if we love Krishna, then we're connected with everyone else because we see they're part of Krishna. It's not that we love Krishna and you don't care for anybody else. You love Krishna, and therefore you especially care for everybody else because you see how everybody's connected. So just in that simple way, actually, being a Vaishnava and studying, practicing this philosophy, this culture of life, it's quite beautiful, actually. You know, for people to say, you know, what do you think the goal of life is? I mean, some people say, you know, it's rock and roll. You know, and other people will say, well, it's, you know, to make a lot of money. And somebody else will say, well, I've got my bucket list. You know, I want to go swimming in the Riviera and, you know, whatever. Or I want to take a ship. I want to see the glaciers of Norway before I die or something like that. You know, these are their priorities. But we say, no, it's a simple priority in one sense, but profound, which is to awaken our love for God and Krishna. By doing that, we learn to love every living being. So in a sense, we're trying to figure out we're trying to connect with a Valentine's Day forever. Only Valentine's Day, only day that's focused on love. So it's a nice goal, but sadly at the same time, we realize in the world today, that's not the case. And unfortunately, as we understand from our Vaishnava perspective, that this world is a tricky one, because when we try to love one thing, oftentimes that means we don't love something else. Or maybe we even find ourselves in competition with something else, or oftentimes even enmity towards something else, or even sometimes hatred of something else. And I was thinking about it just to give an example that maybe not everybody on this call would relate to, but certainly some of your fellow Bostonians. If you love the Patriots, then by nature you have to hate the Buccaneers because they stole our guy and we should have won again this year. So loving one means hating another. Or, you know, let's love Boston. I've been there enough to know, let's love Boston. Of course, it's a little bit of a joke, but still it's smoking gun. We love Boston, we hate New York, isn't it? That's kind of like, that's the other side of the coin there. Or I live in Washington, D.C., so you can say, I love Republicans, I hate Democrats, or I love Democrats, I hate Republicans. In fact, I saw a survey the other day, and they said it actually gotten to the point where it was a huge percentage of people, 50, 60%, said not only the other political party, they disagreed with them, they actually thought they were enemies. So I love my Democrats or my Republicans so much, I see the other party as enemies, that they're actually harming the country. So my love goes up for this and my hate for something else goes up. This is the nature, unfortunately, in this world. You know, we see on a national level, you know, we love America, and now we're all, you know, a little nervous about China and, you know, how powerful are they and they're competitors to us and all those kind of things. And even we see, sadly, people that try to awaken a sense of love for all humanity, oftentimes they do so at the expense of other species, whether it's other, you know, animals or other aspects of the environment. So many times, of course, not always, you know, we don't want to say that there aren't good people trying to do very, very good things in the world, but also just analyzing, we see there's definitely a strong tendency. You could say even it's a principle, but at least a tendency that this world creates us versus them. If I'm for this, then I'm against that. And sadly means love on the material plane yields hatred. And as Vaishnavas, we're trying to understand, is there a way to love that evokes love for everything and everyone and every living being? Is that just some idealistic, you know, dreamer's conception? Or is that a possibility? Prabhupada talked about this early on in his Back to Godhead magazines before he even came to the West, so in the 40s or so. And he wrote about I think he used this term, the frenzy of love leads to the frenzy of hate. And at that time, it was, I believe he wrote this post-World War II. So he was talking about how, you know, the love for this group of people led to the hatred of that group of people, or this nation against that nation. So as Vaishnavas, we're really seeking to understand, how can we awaken love of everyone, awaken love of God, and thus awaken love of everybody? That's the goal, to do that. So the question becomes, okay, well, that's nice. You know, it's a nice sentiment. You people want to love everybody. That's great. You know, it's like cotton candy. So it's only sweet on the outside, sweet on the inside, but it's kind of fluffy. Not a lot to it. People might think like that. But we say, no, actually, this is something very practical. It's something we can taste, we can experience, we can we can see our consciousness opening up to that and becoming part of that worldview and actually live that worldview. But they're right, it's not superficial like cotton candy. It requires transformation. And that's what the human form of life is meant for. It's for understanding, how do we get there? It's not just, oh, wouldn't that be nice? But how do I get there? Like someone may say, oh, I really want to go to Boston. Well, why don't you go? Oh, well, I really want to go to Boston. Well, why don't you go? Well, I really want to go. So I'd really like to learn to love everybody. I'd really like to minimize the hatred in the world. Well, why don't you do it? Well, I don't, it's too much work, or I don't think you can do it, or how do you do it? We say, no, there's a process. There's a process. And that process is yoga, and particularly bhakti yoga, especially bhakti yoga. And that awakening that love for God and for all beings is actually the opportunity that we have in this life. And that's why Prabhupada crossed the ocean and translated and published so many books, and why devotees go on Harinam parties and go out to try to interact with the public, to try to give people this opportunity, how they too can understand what's the process to achieve this beautiful ideal. And we know in the Ishopanishad, Prabhupada describes that any kind of yoga, it begins with controlling the mind and the senses. So we need a process. How do we transform our consciousness, the way we live, and awaken this actual experience of love and care for all living beings? It begins, Prabhupada writes, in the Gita, many places, Krishna himself also says, it begins with controlling the mind and the senses. So it's very practical. Just like if somebody says, okay, it's Valentine's Day. Geez, I really, I love my wife so much. She's the most important person in the world to me. Well, if that's true, you have to control your mind and your senses, or you can't love anybody, isn't it? How do you love someone if you don't control your mind and your senses? Because if you love someone, then you go to work, or maybe you stay home and you do some things, but whatever you do with them in mind, right? Typical experience, the partner, the husband, the wife, they go to work and they control their desires, what to do with that money, right? The guy's got a job and he goes out and he gets his paycheck, and on the way home, he spends every penny of it at the bar. And then he comes home and he, says to his wife, I really love you so much. Well, oh, that's great, honey. Where's the paycheck? I spent it on the way home. Think, well, is that love? Not so much. If we love our children, then you control your anger when they do something disturbing. You don't really feel like it, but you help wash the dishes. You don't really feel like it, but you wash the car. You give up things for your family in this example. So to love somebody even in this world means you have to control the mind and the senses. And Krishna is telling us that in order to awaken our love for him, we also have to learn to control our mind and our senses. Like they say, I think it's a beautiful expression that love is not a feeling, it's a verb. Love's not a feeling, it's a verb. It's something you do. If you love someone, you do something. You don't just say, oh, I love you. There's a little story I'll just relate. I think it's one of the, I read some book, I get confused sometimes. I think it's the Stephen Covey book. It might be way back to like Dale Carnegie, one of those people, about how the man that went to a training session and he told the trainer at the end, he went up to him and he said, I have a problem. And you talked a lot about personal relationships. He said, I don't love my wife anymore. I don't know what to do. And the teacher said, well, then love her. And the man was a little confused. He said, no, you don't understand. I have a problem in relationship because I don't love my wife anymore. And he said, well, then love her. And the man was totally confused. He said, well, what do you mean? And he said, this exact point, love's not a feeling, it's a verb. If you love your wife, you love your spouse, you love your friends, you love your family, then you do things for them. You become a little selfless. You control your mind, you control your senses in a way that is beneficial for them. So Krishna is explaining in the whole Bhagavad Gita and in these verses we're reading, I'll get into analysis of the specific verse in a minute. If we want to awaken the supreme love, we have to do the same thing. Just like, again, if you're a friend, you control your mind and senses to express your love. If you're a parent, you control your mind and senses to express your love, to be able to manifest your love. So if we want to awaken our love for Krishna, also we have to control our mind and our senses. And then that helps us serve God, and it helps us reawaken our love for him. And this is another really wonderful part of the Vaishnava philosophy. It's just so beautiful that actually we all have a relationship already with Krishna. It's not like we think, well, I'm not rich enough to have a relation with Krishna, or I'm too cynical to have a relation with Krishna, or I don't have enough faith to have a relation with Krishna, or I'm too distracted by the material world, or I'm not educated enough. No. That's all nonsense. We all have a relation with Krishna. It's there. We just forgotten it. Every person. It's not like some people are the chosen people, or some people are saved, or some people are anointed, or some people are blessed and others aren't. No, that's not the Vaishnava philosophy. Our philosophy is everybody has an eternal relation with Krishna. It's just a question of reawakening that, reconnecting. Again, that's where yoga comes in, to yoga, to reconnect with Krishna. And we do that in the beginning by controlling, well, throughout, but especially in the beginning, by controlling the mind and the senses. So we control our minds, we control our senses, control our bodies and our speech, and we learn to control our different, our emotions. We direct them in a proper way to connect with Krishna. So we reconnect with Krishna by making we connect with the deities, and we connect with Krishna's name. We connect with prasadam, food that's been sanctified, connected to Krishna. We connect with devotees. We connect with the teachings of Krishna. We connect with music. We connect with art. Like I'm looking around this little apartment office of mine, and by Krishna's grace, I've got pictures of Prabhupada and pictures of the deities and pictures of Lord Varaha, and I got Ram Leela over there, and I got Krishna Lily behind me here, and I got a picture of Shri Shri Radha Rasa Bihari from Boston here, a little picture of Prabhupada on my desk, and it just, why is it there? Because I have some affection, but also it helps me remember all of those personalities and my connection with them. So our whole process is really simple, which is the relationship with Krishna exists, and we just have to reconnect. It's a simple thing. But Prabhupada gives an example. He says it's simple. The process is simple, but he says the application's hard. Some of us may experience this from time to time. I certainly do. It's like, yeah, probably you say it's a simple process, but sometimes it doesn't seem so simple. At least it doesn't seem easy. It may seem simple, chant, dance, and feast. Wow, how could it be more simple than that? Or just chant to be happy. That's pretty simple formula. But he describes the application is not so easy sometimes. So why is that? Because lots of reasons, and one or two of those is because we have this rebellious tendency. Krishna's asking us to do certain things, but we're still rebellious. And maybe even more importantly, we're distracted. And we've all had the experience, some of you here may be parents, or else we've seen other people's kids. It's like a 2-year-old. Oftentimes you give a 2-year-old a good instruction, what's their immediate response? No. Gopi or Vishnu or Mary or Steve or Raji, come and sit down. It's time for dinner. No. Why not? No, I don't want, I want to play. I want to do something. Yeah, but you see, it's dinner and this is good for you. And after dinner, you can play. No. So we're kind of like spiritual 2-year-olds in that sense. Krishna's trying to tell us, and not just Krishna, Krishna's telling us, Lord Chaitanya came and told us, Jesus came and told people, Buddha came and told people, at least a large percentage of the same facts. He didn't get into the personality of Godhead. Moses, Muhammad, Ramachandra, go back, so many great teachers and acharyas of different traditions, teaches the same thing, but we tend to say no. So to help us within the Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna is giving us small steps we can take to get to that point of having our mind controlled, our senses controlled, so we can focus on his name, focus on the deities, not kind of cause so much trouble in the world around us, and make that connection and become happy. So here in this verse, so now we get to this verse. Here it's being described how we can use speech in a way that connect us to Krishna and purify us and not take us away from him. And we know we have like our four, when devotees get initiated in this gun, right? We take our 4 vows: no illicit sex, no intoxication, no meeting, no gambling. We call those the 4 principles, but those are there to accompany what in many ways are more important, which is the 4 pillars of spiritual life, which is truthfulness, cleanliness, austerity, and mercy. Those 4 things that devotees promise not to do are kind of like the grossest or the most like measurable, in a sense, ways of breaking those other things. So of not being truthful, of not being clean, of not being merciful, not being austere. So here in today's verse, and I'll read it again, just to remind everybody, and then we'll get into analysis, having done a little bit of an introduction. Austerity of speech consists in speaking words that are truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and also in regularly reciting Vedic literature. So this all comes around to like, why is Krishna telling us we have to do these things? Well, because these things, if we practice it, it helps us become purified, become peaceful, and focus our mind on Krishna and not be distracted and get out of our tendency to be like rebellious and putting blocks up between ourselves and Krishna. So I looked up in the dictionary austerity. It's not a very popular word these days. You don't hear people saying, oh, that's a very austere looking house, or geez, that's an austere dinner, or whatever it is. You don't hear people talking about that. So there's a lot of definitions are given, and they tend to be a little harsh. But the one that I like to talk about without excess, being simple, and being grave. Or I sometimes like to explain to people when I talk about our practices of austerity, I explain it by using the analogy that it means discipline. Someone who's austere means someone who's disciplined. They're making choices to give up certain things in order they can attain other things. So how do we do this in terms of speech? How can I be disciplined or controlled in such a way that's going to help me in my spiritual practice? And that's what's being described in this verse. So we'll go through. Krishna describes and Prabhupada elaborates on a few points: truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating to others, and regularly reciting the Shastra. So look at these a little bit, and then we'll leave some time for some questions. So Krishna says we should be truthful. Which one of us, is there anybody out there who hasn't been told since the time you could understand your native tongue that you're not supposed to tell lies? Isn't it? Your mom or your dad or your teachers or your grandparents or your big brothers and sisters, they all said, don't tell lies. It's not good to lie. Make sure you tell the truth. We've all heard that so many times. The problem is lying oftentimes seems a quicker, easier, smoother path to get what we want. Isn't it? It's just convenient. You know, the boss tells you, how come you're late to work? My car broke down. Well, that's not a fact. You slept in. But if you say you slept in and you think you're going to get in trouble, or the classic joke, right? The teacher asks the student, where's your homework, Billy? My dog ate it. Right? But his dog didn't eat the homework. He just didn't get it done. He stayed up late and watched some TV show or played some game he wants to, or something else came up. But lying seems to be a shortcut. But Krishna's remind us in this verse that in the long run, and oftentimes even in the short run, sometimes immediately comes back, it destroys relationships, isn't it? If we know somebody who's a liar, how can you be good friends with a liar? You can never trust them at all. It makes it very complicated. And of course, we all tell our little lies, and Krishna's telling us that we should get out of that because it destroys relationships. And as it's described in some English poetry, and I couldn't remember who to quote on this, it creates a web. Lying creates a web. You lie once, then you have to lie twice, then you have to lie. It's just this whole huge lying web of lies develops and ruins lives, actually. And I can't help but mention again, I live in Washington, D.C. And it's pretty clear that a series of lies spoken over a long period of time led to a riot and an insurrection and the death of many people, all based on misinformation. That's the power of people spreading misinformation. So Krishna here is telling us, be careful. Don't go down that path. It hurts us, it hurts others, destroys relationships. And one other thing I was thinking about as far as truthfulness from a spiritual perspective, truthfulness to ourselves is possibly the most important thing, because we know we live in this world where everybody's walking around in this illusion, trying to pretend that everything's fine, isn't it? You see somebody more, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm fine. You go to the hospital, somebody's really sick. How are you? I'm fine. You know, somebody's, a relative just passed away. A lot of times, how are you doing? Oh, I'm fine. You know, they're not fine. They're not fine. Nobody's fine. You know, so as yogis, as devotees, we also have to be painfully honest that we're not fine. You know, and as it described, birth, death, old age, and disease. I mean, they're stalking us. They're stalking us. So there's some really uncomfortable things in this world. And once people recognize that, once they're true to themselves, hey, I think something's wrong here, then they can open up and find help. And to the extent that we can't seek help before we're devotees, after we're devotees, if you can't be able to say, look, I need help, that important truth, then it really limits the progress we can make. So truthful. Second thing Krishna says, we should be pleasing. And I was thinking, I remember, a long time ago, but I remember as a teenage boy, and I went through a phase of life, and hopefully I got over it, but I think it still haunts me sometimes. Like, you showed off your power by how like nasty you can be in the way you talk to people. I can remember like being on the school bus, and if you said things really kind of smarty things to your friends, that was like how you kind of showed off how cool you were, that your tongue could lash out at people. And you think about like a lot of the modern comedy these days, it's just cutting down the other person. It's not pleasing to others, it's disrespectful of others, it's harsh of others. And I was thinking the modern world is kind of like, we're just full of, everybody's trying to be like a teenage boy and see how cruel they can be in their words. Not everybody, of course, but Krishna's advising us, watch out for these tendencies in ourselves. And I remember I had before I became a devotee, I went to university for a few years, and I had a summer job in a factory. And I remember how I was struck by the fact, this is my very clear memory, I could literally tell who the best friends were. There's a lot of people in the factory. I was only there a few months, didn't know that many people, but you're kind of getting to know who's who. Whoever used the most vile, disgusting language towards somebody else, they were friends. Because if they weren't such good friends, they beat each other up for using those kind of words about each other. And I remember thinking, even I wasn't a devotee yet, I was starting my spiritual practice, but how shocking that was to me. So Krishna's saying, don't do that. Don't allow yourself to speak in that way, because it hurts others, it hurts relationships, and it pollutes our minds. We allow those things to come out of our mouths. It pollutes our minds. It promotes our selfishness, and it hurts our hearts, and it hurts the hearts of others. And it doesn't bring us closer to Krishna. So again, yoga, Krishna is saying you have to practice yoga. You have to practice austerity. That means we try to not speak in a way that is only beneficial, that is only pleasing to others, which is very closely connected to the third point Krishna makes. We should speak in such a way that's beneficial. And as devotees, we have a really wonderful way to help us do this, which is our philosophy tells us we're servants. Now, if I'm the master, then, why should I waste my time, trying to help other people? They're all meant for my enjoyment. America's the best, and we can, buy our clothes from around the world, and who cares what kind of horrible labor conditions people work in, because we're the enjoyers. Or if I'm the, the head of the household, and, the rest of the family members are meant for me, to serve me, then I don't have to speak or act in a way that's beneficial. But if we understand that I'm a servant, that Krishna is actually the only supreme person, and I'm his servant, of course, and that also means I'll be happy by serving him. It's not a materialistic way of service. But if we see ourselves as servants, then we want to help other people, and we'll want to speak in a way that's beneficial to others, always, that every word out of our mouth, whether it's the bus driver, the milkman, the guy in the elevator, the devotee at the temple, the teacher, the student, the neighbor, the boss, every word we speak is beneficial. That's what Krishna is telling us we should do. You know, spiritual life, it's not some airy-fairy kind of thing. It's practical. People should be able to see, oh, this person's a devotee of Krishna. Look, they never say anything harmful. People are like, what is it about you? You always say nice things. Well, you wanted the secret. I'm chanting this mantra. How come you're different? Because I'm understanding the need to control myself for the benefit of others. Not that I think, this is a big flaw I see sometimes in myself and in others. It's not that we think I'm a devotee, I can do anything I want. No, I'm a devotee because I do things only for Krishna. That because I do the right things, that means I'm a devotee. Not because I'm a devotee, I can do anything I want, or worse yet, whatever I do is right. So it's difficult. One of the reasons we don't speak, or people often don't speak beneficially towards others, frankly, is because they're in too much pain. Isn't it? Oftentimes we're just, people, there's so much pain, emotional pain, physical pain, memories of pain, anxiety about future pain, that it's really hard to be kind to others. And this is where, in our process of Krishna consciousness, as we go deeper and we awaken our faith in Krishna and some experience of Krishna, and we start really understanding and believing and realizing that the world actually is meant to uplift everybody. It's a tough place. It's a universe full of tough love, but it has an uplifting purpose, and therefore that gives us hope. And as we become more Krishna conscious, then we can speak in such a way that helps others, and we can overcome, envy of other people and things like that. So Krishna is saying that a yogi, controls our speech, controls this tendency to say harmful things. And I had a little more to talk about that. What do we do after we've said some harmful things? But I'll maybe leave that for the end if there's some time. And just go on to the last one or two here. Krishna mentions, we talk about beneficial. Krishna says that we should speak from the Shastra. And of course, the most beneficial thing we can do with our speech is to help people connect with Krishna. And that's also an art. When he says that, it doesn't mean we drive down the street on a bus in Boston and yell out the window, chant Hare Krishna. People think, what kind of nut are you? We think, oh, this is the most beneficial thing. No, there has to be some art of delivering that. Not just that we force ourselves or our philosophy on other people, but we learn to understand how to speak and how to be beneficial in a way that people can take it. And when I think of these examples, I think of Aisheshika Prabhu, who's done such a wonderful job with others, of course, over the last few years of really changing the culture of our outreach to book distribution. In the earliest years of ISKCON, we were young and naive and overzealous, and we stepped on a lot of people's toes. And because of that, we got a lot of pushback. A lot of people became resentful, not appreciative. But I know Vaisheshika Prabhu talks about we have to be so focused on this being beneficial in our speech that he says that the first priority is leave people with a good impression. So powerful. That means we're speaking beneficially, we're acting in a beneficial way. And then just two more real quick. Prabhupada says, or Krishna says, we should speak in a way that's not agitating to others. And it's interesting, it's the last or the second to last in the verse. Prabhupada puts it the first in his purport. We should not speak in a way that's agitating to others. In the communications discipline, we talk about that means I need to understand the needs, interests, and concerns of others. If I'm not going to agitate other people, I need to understand what's agitating to them. Just so you know, maybe there's a simple example that people may be from a national group or an ethnic group or a gender group or whatever, where there's certain derogatory words. And if we don't know, we use some word towards some person or group of persons, very, very, very agitating for them. We may think, well, I didn't know. Well, because we didn't take the time to figure it out. So in our relationships with our friends, with our family, with co-workers, with fellow devotees, we also have to be a little sensitive to understand what's agitating to people and what's not, to help them, to be thinking about, well, how can I say this in a way that's going to be helpful to them and not agitate? Because oftentimes we're trying to offer people good advice, but if we, you like that old song, right? Just a spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. So we may have the right medicine, but if we don't mix it with sugar and they don't take it, it's not good. And then the last point, regularly reciting the Vedas. Of course, especially we know the fruit of the Vedic literature, the Bhagavad-Gita described as the cream or the fruit of the Vedas. And we know Krishna says in Bhagavad-Gita that of all the Vedas, the highest is understanding him. That's the purpose of the Vedic literature. He's the compiler, he's the purpose of it. So I'll just give a quick summary and then we'll open up for some questions or some comments. So summary, the goal of life is the perfection of Valentine's Day. People say, you people don't celebrate these holidays. This one, we got this one down. Valentine's Day, we've got it to its perfection. We understand we want to awaken love for God and we want to awaken our love for all living beings and not be sectarian about it. We want to perfect the concept of Valentine's Day. So that's our first point. Goal of life is to awaken our love. Second point, to do so, we have to become purified. We're separated from Krishna. What separates us is our consciousness is not pure. We're distracted by different things. We're rebellious to Krishna for so many different ways, but it's natural for us, each and every one of us, Prabhupada explains, our Acharyas explains, we have a relationship with Krishna. Nobody is disqualified. Nobody is too fallen or too, the Christians use the term a lot. We do a little bit too sinful or I did this in the past and nobody's disqualified. Krishna's so kind, but we need to become purified. And that requires controlling our mind and our senses. We have to work on that. It's an endeavor. And then the third point in summary, part of that, this particular verse today, means learning to control our speech. Bhaktivinoda Thakur describes the tongue as the most difficult to control of all the senses, our eyes and our ears. The tongue, he says, is the most difficult to control. And Krishna here is telling us how to do it. Work at being truthful. If you catch yourself saying a lie, don't do that again. Apologize, correct it, stop for a minute and think about, why did I do that? That wasn't helpful to me, wasn't helpful to them. And then you try harder. And every time you try, it gets a little bit easier. Be truthful, be pleasing in what we say. Check our words. We all have this tendency to be a little hurtful. Me too. Yeah, I was a teenage boy and I've still got that tendency and I got to watch it very carefully. And I'm not very good at it, but Krishna's reminding me to speak words that are pleasing, words that are beneficial, what's going to help people. Not just that I say something because I want to express my anger because it makes me feel good. Sometimes devotees will say, well, Prabhupada get angry. Yeah, Prabhupada get angry sometimes, but you study his anger. It was for the benefit of those people. Because in a split second, somebody else would walk in the room, probably be like, gentle and sweet and laughing. That person needed a little bit of anger. It wasn't because Prabhupada had to express his anger, but that's what happens to us sometimes. I want to express my anger without considering what's the impact on others. So truthful, pleasing, beneficial, not agitating, and of course, reciting the Vedas, the instructions of our Acharyas on a regular basis. And if we do so, we're going to be happier. Others in our lives are going to be happier. We're going to awaken our love for Krishna and all living beings. And our life is going to become one eternal Valentine's Day in love with Krishna. So that's the opportunity that we all have. So I'll stop there. Thank you all. I have to admit, one thing about Zoom is you have a really attentive audience, because anybody wants to fidget or move around, they just push that button, their name pops up and you think they're there. You don't really know. It's a really magical system. But thank you for all being here. To whatever extent you have been, and I'm not saying that in jest, I really appreciate it that devotees are here. And let's open up for some questions or some comments. I really like to hear from some of you. Jai Prabhupada. Badamali, do you like filter questions, or people just
Hare Krishna.
on their mics, or what
Hare
do you
Krishna,
do?
Prabhu.
Hopefully I have a few questions.
No filter.
Somebody.
It's unfiltered.
Okay. So now somebody said something in the chat. Should I go there?
Yes, bro. Please go ahead. I know it's Laurel.
Laurel. Okay. That's a nice way to spell Laurel. Laurel writes, okay, good. Practical topic. As a white-bodied person, I try to actively speak against racism. How do you do that in a way that doesn't, oh, wow, tricky question. How do you do that in a way that doesn't agitate racists? I thought you were going to say, how do we do that in a way that doesn't agitate black-bodied people? Because that's the first thing is we have to be sensitive in our effort to try to stand up for others or support others to make sure we're also not patronizing. You know, I'm a white person come here to help black people, or I'm a man come here to help women, or I'm a woman come here to help the men. Or it's like, okay, well, first of all, make sure they want our help, whoever they are, and to be in the mood humbly. How exactly can I help? And what language can I use that's appropriate? And you know, to be sensitive to all that. I know, like I do some work on religious freedom issues, and it's tough with India right now, because at least the previous administration, United States government and others are having a real tough time understanding why the Indian government is not doing real well in some ways with their minorities. But you talk to a lot of people kind of in sync with, you know, some people, in the way people see from India, is there's this whole baggage of colonialization and colonialism, and you know, British equals Christian, and Muslims equal Mughal invaders, and there's this whole thing. So you know, you just try to say something simple like, you know, we need to protect minorities, which makes a lot of sense from American perspective, but it digs a lot of stuff up. So I think that's the first thing I would say, Laurel, is we all have to be a little humble and understand, how do we make sure we're not part of the problem ourselves, even with good intentions. And then the second part of your question, you asked more directly, how do we say speak out against racism and not agitate racists? I think that gets back to the principle Prabhupada taught, which is time, place, and circumstance. You know, we talk about this in our communications work, that we have to understand the audience. The first and foremost thing is to understand the audience. Because we don't understand, let's say you've got let's say you're a radio station, and you're putting out some really nice sound. You got the best radio in the world. You got the best quality music and the best news and all of that stuff. So you're broadcasting that. How successful are you just by broadcasting? There's no success just by broadcasting. Success comes when people tune into that station. If the audience doesn't tune in, no matter how well intended and how professionally produced and expert and high quality your broadcasting is, your written word, your voice, your visuals, if nobody turns it on, if you don't make that connection, it's not any good. So I think the question that you're bringing up, in part, we have to really see who wants to hear. Are they willing to hear? And then we have to figure out, and this gets right into communications discipline and theory, what's important to them to help them hear. So in other words, let's say dealing with this big issue of racism, and I'm not an expert, just but because you put that as a topic on speech. For me to try to understand, why is a person racist? You know, what's the experience that they have? Let me give an example that's closer to home. I do some work with people that are called anti-cultists, okay? These are organizations that are very concerned about religious groups, political groups, psychological, you know, groups, psychotherapy groups that manipulate people. And you know, we've been on their list of groups they're worried about in the past, and we still pop up in their minds now and then. So I've been trying, you know, been putting some energy for the last 20 years to building relationships with these people. And I could start out by just saying, you people have no idea what you're talking about. You know, you say that we're brainwashed, or so many things you say, this is an ancient religion and chanting is good for you. I can hit them over the head with all those things that I'm convinced about, or I can stop and think, what is it these people are upset about? and I can listen before speaking. So you're saying, how do I talk to them? I would say it's got to start by listening to them, Laurel. So with an example of anti-cult people, I listen to them, I find out they're concerned about abuse of power. Well, hey, I'm concerned about that too. You know, they're concerned about maybe sometimes some of these groups, you know, damage family relationships. They tell young people, you know, cut your family off. Well, I'm concerned about that too. Christian consciousness, you know, we think family is a wonderful thing. It strengthens society and et cetera, et cetera. You know, the vast majority of people grow house to life. It's great for us. It's important. They're concerned about people misrepresenting the truth. Whoa, you know, we got 4 pillars. Truthfulness. That's so by listening to them, I can understand where we can build bridges. So you know, for whatever terrible things may be going on in the minds of some people who are, you know, racist or sexist or this or that or so many terrible things, to try to understand why they think like that, what's their experience been, and then try to bring them around in a way that's appropriate that they can hear is a way to approach some of those very difficult and very sensitive topics. And I'm trying to speak in general from kind of the training I have in communications work. And Laurel, I can't see you, but hopefully that was a little bit helpful. Okay, let's see. She's chatting back. I kind of realize now that reducing a whole being down to a racist for doing racist things when there's much more to being than when being negative is harsh. Yeah. No, that's good. You type quickly and yeah, that's it. And again, it doesn't mean at all we condone that kind of behavior or that kind of mindset, but we are understanding how we're going to bring people around. And oftentimes it starts with listening. Okay. So any other questions or anything wasn't clear or any comments, any reflections?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, can I ask you a question? Parmali Prabhu, do I have?
I can't
Yes,
see
Can
you.
Prabhu?
It's kind
Sure.
of like talking to the people, but go for it, Prabhu.
Like open up your video, Prabhu, and then
Krishna Prabhuji, thank you for the nice class.
Oh, Hare Krishna. I knew
Hare
you were a
Krishna.
human being, but I wasn't sure. Now I know. You're not a machine.
As well. Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, thank you for the nice class, and you explained about the importance of talking nicely with others. But sometimes unknowingly, even though we have that intention that we want to speak nicely with us, but sometimes with others, sometimes unknowingly we go into the mood of offending others. But how do we monitor and any triggering, like how do we monitor ourselves so that when that kind of situation comes, we can balance our situation? So could you please give me any practical tips, Prabhu? Hare Krishna.
Yeah, that's a great question. A few little practical things. One, of course, we have to study this. We have to, go back and reread this verse on a regular basis to remind yourself that this is the goal, because the world at large is not telling us that's the goal. The funniest people, the most powerful people, sometimes like, the political leaders, they don't all necessarily get there because they spoke in a nice, truthful, and, helpful way. So it seems out there, the opposite is true, but it's not true, but there's a perception. So we have to remind ourselves first that this is the goal. Another thing we can do in a practical way, and this is kind of one of those things, if we're getting really serious and say to your wife, say to your brother, say to your father, your mother, your friends, your kids, this is, some real serious soul searching here. I have a problem that I get angry sometimes and I say things that are hurtful, and I don't want to do that. It's a problem. It's a block for me in my spiritual life. It's a block for me in my relationship with Krishna. I know it hurts you, and I need help. It reminds me, if I can, I'll tell a quick story that kind of ties with is it Laurel or Lorelei? It's kind of spelled like, is it Lorelei? It's spelled like that. I don't want to get it wrong.
It's Lorelei.
Okay. So kind of related to your question. I have a friend, not a close friend, but someone I really admire, who's a professor of new religious movements, who I heard him tell this story. white guy, older guy now. He's probably, 70 or something like that. Like me, older guy. And he tells a story when he went to a southern man, and he went to university, and there was a black student there, and he'd been raised in a very racist family. He didn't have any black friends. He had huge issues with black people. Was very prejudiced. He recognized that. So he saw this black student. He describes the story. He walked across the cafeteria and went up to him and said, "I have a problem with you." And this black guy said, "What's your problem?" He said, "My problem is I was raised to hate you, and I need help getting over that." We talk about courage, talk about character, talk about somebody who's inspired by his faith in God. And as he tells the story, I don't remember all the details, but they talked and they actually became friends. And he took this black kid home to stay with his parents, and he went with him to go and stay with his black family, because he realized that this is a block. This is wrong. This is bad. This is evil, and it's existing in my heart. So in a similar way, maybe not as dramatic, we can share that with our friends and our colleagues and say, I need a little help with this. And in other situations, we just make put a sticky tack on the mirror. I'm going to speak beneficially today, or catch yourself. It comes with practice, right? It's like a sport, right? You're trying to hit the ball, you miss it, you try it again, you try it again, you try it again until you get it right, and you don't give up. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhuji. Thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
You can
Thank you for the
remember.
nice answer.
You can remember from time to time this nice Methodist man professor. If he's got the courage to do that, our little problems, we can overcome those. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu.
There is a comment in the chat box.
Okay, let's see. The last one's not a question. It says, "I don't have questions at the moment, but I like the lecture." Thank you. I'm glad you like the talk. And when we talk about austerity of speech, that's so applicable for me in all parts of my day. Yeah, me too. I'll sit here and give this nice talk about, austerity of speech, and then I'll go outside and, say to my wife, "How come you let the soup get cold?" Like, I didn't need to say that. I know why the soup got cold, because she's giving a class to St. Louis in the other room. So why am I saying that? Don't say that, Catch ourselves and just keep working at it. And one thing I think should inspire us as devotees, there's a lot of self-help groups, and there's a lot of, good spiritual and religious communities out there. They're also endeavoring in these ways. And at the same time, we're fortunate to associate with people whose goal in life is to actually become pure-hearted. It's not just that we believe, God loves us and that's all we got to do. God loves us, and we want to live that love in our own lives. And we want to not become worthy of God's love, because in that sense, it means that we're not, but we want to be able to reciprocate with that by cleansing our hearts. And we know, God's the Supreme Father. I just heard a lecture the other day, probably saying he's, Krishna. He said that's not, the Vaishnavas don't worship Krishna in that mood. The Vaishnavas like to think of Krishna as our own child, right? With advanced devotees, that's one of the primary rasas. But he said, but God is the Father of everyone. So we automatically have this connection. We're just trying to kind of take all the coverings off our hearts so we can experience it. What a beautiful, what a ideal, wonderful philosophy. So Shivani says, Hare Krishna. Does that mean that you have a question, Shivani? Please feel free.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. No, Prabhuji, I don't have any question, but I really like your lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. See how Shivani is expertly demonstrating what we just talked about. She spoke, she was pleasing, it was beneficial. It was, she was appreciating whatever Shastric references were there. Thank you, Shivani, for giving a nice example for all of us. Indulekha, do you have any questions? You were so kindly had your screen on the whole time, so I knew you were there listening very attentively. I appreciate that. Any questions that you might have or comments? You're reflecting deeply. I can see from your face and the way you're listening attentively.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, it was really nice class. Thank you. And I personally, I have a lot of issues with anger and offending devotees. And in this year, especially, Krishna arranged for me just to sit at home way before pandemic. I'm on medical leave, and that devotee association was not available for me way before pandemic started. So, you know, when you lose something, then you really appreciate it. So I've been reflecting on that. How sometimes in my mind, I think like I am doing something for protection of others, but in the long run, now I'm reflecting like it wasn't really correct way to do it or correct thing to say. So how to always check yourself. What is better, to stay quiet? When do we need to speak up? I don't know if that's
No, that's great. And thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing what you said about, you know, we could all say a similar thing. I have a problem with blank, anger, greed, lust, envy, whatever. You know, for me, they kind of come up regularly. It's like fish coming out of the water. You know, anger pops up, and then lust comes up, and then greed comes in, and then envy comes in, and then, you know, sloth and whatever those other, you know, ways of describing the cardinal sins. So yeah, they're there. And so you're asking, and you're understanding that when I lose the association of devotees, how precious that is. And then you want to appreciate it more and help not get angry. So that's, I mean, a big part of it is just what you're talking about now, just thinking about it and you know, being so open to share it with others. It's kind of like, you know, bearing your soul. And also I think a really, really, really important part is just praying to Krishna about it, you know, verbalizing, Krishna, I got this problem and I need your help. Like that man did, you know, he went over to that black student, fellow student of his, and said, I got a problem. And I think also for me, I find something important for me to remember. Krishna says in the Gita, every endeavor is covered by some degree of fault. Every endeavor. So we're always going to mess it up to one extent or the other. So we have to be very careful. One of the ways Maya tries to trick us, because her job is to, you know, keep us here, right? She's like, okay, we wanted to come here, so she's there at every moment. Don't you want to stay longer? How about this little trinket? You know, how about this little thing? You know, here's a little distraction. Oh, look at that. Oh, look at this. So that's her job. She's very good at it. So part of that, you know, being prayerful, you know, I need help with this, and not don't beat ourselves up. You know, we shouldn't, in the process of critiquing ourselves, we have to be honest and critique ourselves. I need work here. I need to work on this. That scene where we need to work on ourselves shouldn't discourage us. Just the opposite. It should encourage us. Like, well, Krishna's showing me now where I need to work. He's helping me so I can make further progress in my spiritual life. And anytime the mind starts telling us, I'm too this, I'm too that, you know, I'm too angry, I'm too bitter, I'm too, you know, whatever. We should think, no, that's just Maya. You know, there's a story one time a devotee came to Prabhupada and was telling Prabhupada, I'm so fallen, I'm the most fallen, this, that. Prabhupada said, you're not the most anything. So see, this again, the false ego is just trying to trick us, you know, oh, I'm too fallen. We're not too fallen. Who's too fallen for Lord Chaitanya? That's an offense to think I'm too fallen. It means I don't understand how powerful Lord Chaitanya is. I don't really see the miracles that Prabhupada worked. So don't, you know, keep going. Krishna will help you. Pray. And of course, we also know the other side of there is Prabhupada talks about Hanuman used his anger for the Lord, right? Arjuna used his anger for the Lord. So it's not that, you know, we become stones, but, you know, if we can sometimes dovetail our anger in Krishna's service, you know, Be angry at the dirt in the corner behind your couch and let that mobilize your energy to move the couch and roll up the rug and clean things really nicely. You know, be a little angry at yourself because you wasted too much time yesterday, and use that to motivate you to get up a little earlier tomorrow. And we can use those things for Krishna service too. Okay. Thank you, Indulekha. So I can go on a while longer unless Vanamali tells me that we got to shut it down. There's a question from Giri Haran. Can we go ahead, Vanamali? Is that all right? We go a little while longer?
Maharaj, yeah, Anutam Prabhu, I think maybe that should be the last question.
Okay.
Okay. For the day. Yeah. So Giridhar Prabhu, please ask the question.
Sure, Prabhu. Yeah. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you for your very.
You're in my corner. Okay, I see you there. Yeah. Are you a disc jockey?
Yes, Prabhu.
You look like a disc jockey. Are you a disc jockey?
No. It's just this is just my office headset. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Thank you for the organized lecture, Prabhu. Like, it was very excellently organized, like very well connected, each point one after another, and like expertly tying to the occasion and the verse and everything. Thank you very much for the lecture, and also thank you for your answer for the previous question about the most fallen part. That actually kind of answered one of my other concerns too. The question that I have on your lecture is you spoke about speaking lies. So I was wondering, like, sometimes you tend to rationalize your action, like you rationalize sometimes, like saying that calling it white lie, like I'm actually lying for good of the other person, like speaking beneficially for the others. Or you sometimes you even say that, okay, quote Yudhishthira's action and say that, okay, I'm actually not lying, I'm just hiding the truth. Things like that. So when do we like, how do you see the difference?
Yeah, well, one thing I'll mention that, the danger is the white lies become gray lies, become dark gray lies, become full lies, whatever, right? So we have, I think the first thing is, it just, Krishna says, right, truthful. And also that's the quality of a Brahmana. A Brahmana is truthful, right? And we have our 4 pillars, truthfulness. So first accept the principle that I'm supposed to be truthful. Now, just like, there's a principle, I'm supposed to obey the speeding laws, right? We all accept that's a speeding, that's a principle. Now, okay, maybe you go 5 miles over, they don't care, but you go 15, 20, they don't want you to do that, it's dangerous. Now, with that principle, we know the classic example, the husband's driving down the road, 2 o'clock in the morning, going way over the speed limit because his wife's about to give birth in the back seat. And okay, the police pulls him over, says, oh my gosh, turns on his alarm. And now they go even faster down the street. So, hey, technically he broke the law, but he was doing it in an emergency situation that anybody could see it's an emergency. And therefore the law, what's the speed limit law for? For the good of the people, ideally, right? So if he's breaking that law for the good of the people in a rare circumstance, and everybody can see that was the right thing to do, then it's justified. So, we should have some tests there. I mean, I work in some parts of the world where the culture is corrupt. It's a corrupt culture. And sometimes devotees think, okay, well, everybody's corrupt, so we have to be corrupt. And one of my little mantras is to say, okay, in an absolute emergency, there's no other choice. Maybe you have to pay some, bribe or something like that. When all other options are exhausted and, but that can't be our pattern, right? So we should be always, 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 always truthful. And in those rare emergency situations, how often do those come up? Okay, I told a lie this morning, okay? I'll confess. I told my wife this morning, I got to go to the Home Depot. I got to buy something to fix our air filter. And she said, okay, I'll see you later. And I came home with a bouquet of flowers. And she said, I knew you were up to something. Okay. Now, I don't know if that's a white lie. I could have told her I'm going to the store because I want to buy you some flowers because it's Valentine's Day. That would have just ruined the surprise. She would have told me, don't go spend the money. It would have been a whole thing and, would have been the exact opposite effect. Okay. So, I mean, that's not 100% truthful. I think that's kind of like that. I would say that's like a rainbow lie. It's not even like a white lie, black lie. I don't even like that differentiation, but I think that's like something that's clearly a little playful for the benefit of everybody. Like the example comes to my mind, Prabhupada playing with baby Saraswati, and when she's a little kid, Malati's young baby daughter. So Prabhupada's like, where's Krishna? He's hiding Krishna from her. He's playing. Well, that's not truthful. Gee, Prabhupada, why are you hiding the doll? You should, that's a different kind of a thing. But in general, as far as other situations, for instance, the boss says, why are you late today? It's easy to get in the habit. We give a little white lie. Nobody's going to know, but it's much better to train ourselves as much as possible. Boss, I slept in, it was a mistake. The alarm didn't work, but what are you going to do? I'm going to go buy another alarm on the way home tonight to make sure it doesn't happen tomorrow. If they're a decent person, they're going to give you credit for that. Appreciate that you're honest, that you came forward and that you fixed the problem. That's a big key. You fixed the problem, and they're going to be more impressed with you. And if they're not, you probably not a good place to work anyway. That's the kind of person they are. I don't know. Does that help at all, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Yeah.
You got a follow up on that? Follow up question?
So it is just, yeah, I understood your reasoning of sometimes you can differentiate it, like whether you can test it, like whether you're doing it more often and things like that. But it's sometimes like only you are there in the situation. Like it's also like the context and everything, like only you are there. So you cannot also like just verify whether what you did is the right thing or not. So, and you see it more often that, okay, like, and sometimes you might actually do it because you yourself don't see any other solution, or you don't want to accept the other solutions. So things like that. So you just, for personally, like you just validate yourself saying that I just did it for the other person's good.
Yeah.
Sometimes because you don't want to accept the other solution.
Well, just the fact you're thinking about that shows that you're a philosopher and a yogi and a bhakta. And that's exactly kind of what I'm talking about. We have to go through that exercise of being self-critical and self-reflective with everything we do. Like Prabhupada describes, it's not just that we can mechanically chant the Maha Mantra. We have to do it with the spirit of devotion and affection for Krishna. In the beginning, anything is good. Anything mechanical is good. It's all good. Eating prasadam, it's sanctified, it's purified no matter what. But we hear about how Prabhupada liked to take prasadam alone. And he was always with people, but he took prasadam alone. Why? I don't know. My sense is because it was a deep meditative devotional act for Srila Prabhupada. So I aspire to appreciate prasadam the way we can understand Prabhupada would appreciate prasadam. So in a similar way, everything we do in a joyful way, in an enthusiastic way. Wow, I'm realizing I should learn to be more truthful. That's wonderful. And let me work at it. I mean, I was thinking about just putting the notes together that, ideally we wake up, and it's kind of hard now. COVID makes it so hard because so many of us are locked down. But, we should wake up every morning thinking, wow, this is fantastic. I've got a whole nother day, and I'm going to interact with the milkman and the bus driver and the taxi driver and the guy in the elevator and everybody else. And what ways does Krishna give me to try to be Krishna conscious today? Which can mean telling somebody, good morning, Hare Krishna, have you read a Bhagavad-Gita? But more times than not, it's good morning, how are you? Nice to see you. And just, being a person living in the mode of goodness. And they start asking you after 27 times up the elevator, and every single morning, no matter what, rain or shine, you're like a smile on your face. And they ask you at some point, they say, Giridharan, why are you smiling all the time? And you really want to know? Or you see that same person in the elevator and, you smile at them a few times, and one day you get on the elevator and say, hey, would you like some homemade cookies? Well, you know they're not just cookies, they're prasadam cookies, right? Or you get on the elevator every day and you're like, singing because you're just so happy thinking about Krishna. After a while, they start asking you, like, well, what are you singing anyway? Every day you're singing. What is that song? So, it's a beautiful song. Can you teach me? Yeah, I'd love to teach you. Starts like this: Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. So those opportunities come more and more and more. And seeing that, it's like, wow, it's exciting. So anyway, hopefully that's some reflection on the lives. And again, please, let me just clarify this. I'm trying to repeat what Prabhupada said. He's wonderfully explaining what Krishna said. And I'm certainly not an example of all of these things, but it's nice for me to be with all of you and talk about it because it helps me remind what I'm also working on. And hopefully I'll be doing a better job in the future also. So Vanamali, should we end there?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you for your wonderful and amazing class, Prabhu. Most importantly, the instructive and very enlightening discussion which we had after the class. On behalf of entire ISKCON Boston, Prabhu, I would like to greatly appreciate and express my deepest gratitude to you. Thank you. And we hope and pray that we get to hear from you. May not be quite often, but at least in some intervals during a year. With that prayers and with that hope, again, I would like to thank you.
Thank you, Prabhu. Honored to be here. Happy to come again. And I'll just mention everybody really briefly, if you're not aware, one of the services that ISKCON Communications provides for the movement is ISKCON News, news.iscon.org, information about the movement and society. And we welcome everybody, take advantage of that. Go there frequently, share it with your friends. And if you have story ideas or things, we are always looking for people like to write and contribute new articles. And we're in a little bit of a restructuring there. So if anybody here actually has some kind of journalistic background or photographic background as a photographer, videographer, anything like that, get in touch with me. But even if you don't have that, we please ask you, visit the site, read the site, share it with some friends. ISKCON News. Okay. Thank you all. It's a pleasure to be with everybody tonight. Really appreciate it. And I pray Krishna continues to bless your community and your hearts, and that you all become empowered to help make the whole world just one big Valentine's Day party in love for Lord Krishna.
Harimo.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So now we'll have.
Mother
Vadana Ujvala Jala Desevana Mara Kore Jalamara Kore Jalamara Jala Desevana Mara Kore
His Divine Grace, Sri Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Om Vishnu Paramahamsa Parivrajakacharya Astuttara Sutta Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gaur Govina Shamakun Radha Kun Gir Govardhan ki jai. Shri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Avadutam ki jai. Gangamai ki jai. Subhudamai ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Samadhi Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Shri Radha Bhakti Vallabha ki jai. Goga Premanandai. All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to the assembled Lord. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga.
Namaste Narasimhaya. Namaste